Hey, superstars. Welcome back to another episode of Word Up with Dani Katz. Today, I am joined by my friend Remington Donovan, who is a Word Up podcast regular at this point. Remington is a published author, numerologist, mystic, astrologer, and he came on the show to talk to us about, of course, all the things, specifically the South Node moving into Libra while the North Node moved into Aries and what that portends for the global situation. Remington and I have a really comfortable flow, and he loves to come on the show because he gets to say whatever the fuck he wants, which is, I'm very happy to offer that space for my fellow free thinkers and rebels. So before we dive in, I'm reminding you to and thanking you for clicking the subscribe button, for liking, sharing, and commenting. I'm also nudging you to sign up for my newsletter at danikatz.com because I am often suppressed on Google, on YouTube, on the socials. And even though I super appreciate you subscribing to my channel, it doesn't actually guarantee that you are going to see me in your feeds or be notified of my next podcasts, Words Are Matter episodes, et cetera, et cetera. So the best way for you to stay apprised of all of my content, my courses, my books, my live events is to sign up for my newsletter at danikatz.com. You can also sign up at quantumlanguaging.com. You will get a free PDF, 5 quantum languaging hacks for instant empowerment. That's right, instant empowerment. And I think that does it on the house. Oh no, it doesn't do it on the housekeeping front because my show is divided into 2 parts. The first half is free on all of the audio podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube and on my locals channel. The second half is reserved for my paying supporters on locals and Patreon. So for as little as $5 a month, you will get access to all of my second half conversations, plus bonus content, plus advance notice and special discounts on courses, webinars, et cetera, et cetera. As well, I like people to know that if you're interested in the podcast I do with Emily Moyer, Words, that is available for my $10 and up supporters. So I just want to give you a full lay of the land so you can decide what's best for you. Links to both platforms, locals and Patreon, are in the show description. As well, I am prepping to teach my last ever live virtual pop propaganda homeschool course for teens. So if you are a parent who is homeschooling a teen and want to safeguard your teen against propaganda, media manipulation, groupthink, definitely sign up for my course. It starts September 13th. I think this show is going to come out before then. And if not, worry not, because I am in the process of digitizing this course, so it won't be reliant upon me or a set schedule for your teens to be able to go through this curriculum. All right, that really does do it for housekeeping. Buckle up and prepare to enjoy my conversation with Remington Donovan. How's it going? How's fatherhood? How's the new book?
Fatherhood is great. Honestly, it's kind of chill. I'm just hitting the view so I can see us both. I mean, he's, knock on wood, but so far he's a really easy kid, like a really sweet temperament. He's high energy, always has to get into things. He's always observing, figuring it out, but his demeanor is really sweet. So it definitely makes probably parenting very easy, or maybe like not getting my shit together till like later in life. I don't know. But it's a joy. It's definitely like a it's interesting because I thought before having a kid, I'm like, oh, it'll just be this like immediate like love at first sight. And that exists, but like at first it's almost like, what? Like, whoa, there's this, where did this human come from? Right. And like, why are they here? And but the love, like it just literally grows every day. Um, it's so yeah, I mean, it's fatherhood's totally chill, to be honest.
I
Like
love
I
it.
hear parents like they're like, oh, it's they're like it, they'll always say like how tough it is first, but rewarding, and that we just like that's just not the case with us.
Nice.
But we're 18 months in, so you know.
But it's nice that you get to offer an alternative narrative to the, standard issue. No sleep. It's a nightmare for the first, 19 years.
Yeah, he and then they moved back home at 35.
Right.
Yeah, you know what? He's mostly a sleeper. I mean, I'm telling you, he's just like chill. He's really bright. He's really smart. I'm sure every parent thinks that. But I'll tell you what the coolest part is like these little advancements. Like I'll hand him something and you could just say, hey, can you throw this in the trash? And he was like just at his grandparents' house. He hadn't been there since he was much younger. And he knew where the trash was. Like he just was like opening the drawer. So their level of observation is pretty mind-blowing. Like he literally knows everything that's happening. And maybe because he's like an Aquarius, he's very observant. It's a fun sign so far to have as a child. What sign are you again?
Aquarius.
Yeah, right. Okay, I thought so. Um, Aquarius is just it's a really fucking bright sign. And it's just smart. It's also kind of it's funny how Aquarius is like friends and community, but I find Aquarius is very independent.
Massively
Like
so.
like he goes to the park. He's really friendly with some of the kids. He's like very sweet, but then he just wants to do his thing. He keeps himself completely occupied and busy for all day. And he remembers everything. I mean, I often say Aquarius is one of the most, if not the most intelligent sign.
Mhm.
I mean,
I'm a fan of hyperbole, so I'll take the most.
uh, I mean, air signs are the smart signs generally, but Aquarius, it's sometimes it's so smart that nobody knows where they're coming from. But
Right. I consider it the most, I mean, I don't know the rest of them, but I feel like we're the misunderstood sign.
I think to some degree, because it's not a sign to like pin up where you can be like, oh, you're into community, you know. But it's a very cosmic energy, but he's like he doesn't get phased by stuff, like he's not like spooked out. Like all of a sudden, I'm like, wait, where is he? He's like just walking down the dark hallway, like hanging. He'll like go into the bathroom when he figured out how to open the door. And it's like dark. He just closes the door and he's just sitting in the dark, like waiting, like he's not spooked out.
Oh, I like
So, and I think that where we live, because it's so small and it's very community sort of driven, and people tend to love kids here.
that.
So his experience of life is everywhere he goes, people just fawn over him and love him. And I
I
feel
love
like, oh, that's a good foundation where he's just like, oh, everywhere I go, people just love me. That I think that's a good transmission.
Absolutely. Just builds confidence and a feeling of safety and like I belong and like kind of in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like good to go.
Yeah, it's like I'll now Instagram is finally after a year and a half figured out that I'm a parent. So
Oh,
I'm getting like I don't know, I've like fooled the Instagram algorithm, but the the uh I'll see these horrible like parenting like technique suggestion. One is like never encourage your kid if they do like a good job, just normalize the behavior. And I'm like, what? Like, because then later in life, if they don't do something good enough and they don't get praise, then they're gonna fail. I'm like, these like early years, if they just feel safe and secure and valued, I think by the time they're off on their own, they're going to just have that foundation. They're not going to care if someone praised them or not. There's just like, and then there's a study. I'm like, none of these studies are true, in my opinion. Like,
Right.
how did you take a control group of kids, one group praised, the other group not praised? And then how many kids would you study and then all the way until adulthood and then watch them as adults, how they behave?
Well, and also how many other X factors are involved beyond just the praise, no praise.
Well, and this the psychic imprint, like if you're going through, who knows, a death, a divorce. I mean, there's endless problems we can go on about. Um, but because they just pick up, children definitely pick up on everything.
Yeah.
So I think he's gonna be fine. I mean, I already have like sad thoughts, like, is he good? Where's he gonna go off to, like, college and stuff? I've already telling him, I'm like, well, Bennington University has one of the most renowned literary fiction and writing programs, and it's 24 minutes from here. So
He's like taking notes at 18
yeah,
months.
just go there,
Okay,
because it's
Dad, Bennington. That's going to cost you a pretty penny, Dad.
that's a really expensive school. Vermont
Oh,
has all
really?
these like little like luxury schools, like Middlebury, Bennington, and then right over the line in Massachusetts is like Williams College, which was also a big CIA recruitment place
Did you
back
go
in
to
the day.
college?
No, I didn't finish.
I mean, I went to college and grad school, and I don't know that it's helped me in my life. I don't,
I
I mean, I know there's this narrative of like kids go to college, but I wonder how relevant it is these days, given that we know they're giant woke indoctrination camps.
Well, there's that. I think that it's becoming less relevant. The only people I know that went to school and are working in their field is either doctors, because that's just a specialized choice, lawyers, and artists. Believe it or not, everyone I know who went to art school are my friends, the people in my life that overall like make the most money and have like the biggest jobs.
Really?
Yeah, so that's a good imprint. Yeah, like
That is.
especially
And how
living,
fun.
like, yeah, my cousin does really well. She's an art school graduate.
Mhm.
And then of course, living in LA, but yeah, it's like I was like, okay, so art school is where the money is, which is the contradiction. Because what do you say to like an art, what do you say to someone who graduated art school? Like, do you want fries with that?
Right. Well, now that you mention it, I'm thinking of my friends who went to art school, and they have leveraged it into money making careers versus like the general liberal arts, like English degree people who are like,
Yeah,
when I was writing for the LA Weekly, I was the only one who had a master's degree in journalism. Like, no one there studied it, no one there really
I
cared.
I super respect that. Like, I sometimes I used to be really insecure about not having finished school, and I didn't really even go. I just, where I grew up, my high school was a subsidiary of the University of Connecticut, and as in high school, you were able to take some college courses. And so
Ooh.
they would take a college course through the high school, and then instead of what they would split it up at like one semester of programming would be like a year in the high school.
Mhm.
So it was like
Oh, that's cool.
I was interested in like religious studies. But I just had a hard time in school, and I viewed it all as like I was going to public school. You really have to fit into a box. And probably for public school, my high school was probably okay. And I just didn't fit. Like, my mind didn't fit with the programming. I had one teacher that was kind of cool, but my greatest memory of high school is I read The Stranger by Albert Camus,
Mhm.
and that book had a huge imprint on my life then and there. And so it was a life-changing book. But all the other, like, nobody explains to you, oh, if you studied literature, what you're going to do is just use it as a springboard to babble of like, have like insight and ideas about life. Like, nobody explained that to me. So I was like, well, school just seems dead. and I love learning, but college seemed intimidating. And then my father died, and he's the one with the money. And I just finally came to terms like I just hate school. And my dad was even like, he got me like booklets. This was like in the 80s when I was in high school. He got me booklets on small colleges,
Mhm.
thinking because he recognized I was smart and I loved learning. I read on my own, but like public school is just, it really, for me, it was mind numbing.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of people, but then there's people that just, they go through it, they're fine, they go to college. And I remember having booklets about small colleges, and they'd have lists of like six, like Ronald Reagan went to a small college somewhere, and look at him, he was president. And I was like, well, okay, that doesn't sell me on it. But that's been when I was younger. I was like ashamed, like I didn't like finish school, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty common because of when we came up. I grew up in California, so it was just kind of assumed we were all going to go to UC schools because the UC system was good and it was cheap. And I learned pretty quickly, like, oh, just regurgitate what my professors are saying and I will get A's.
Oh,
But I
see,
also realized I wasn't really learning anything.
yeah, like I think it's probably like when I hear that, I'm like, oh, it's a good thing I didn't go, because I'm thinking it's
Right.
gonna be some learned environment, like you're sitting around with like Pythagoras, you know? Like, and then what I really was interested in was obscure religion and obscure spirituality. And then I found a route to learn all that and kind of dedicate my life. But I'm thinking of taking some online writing courses through a certain university, um which is mostly just continuing education, so I don't have to go through all the bureaucracy. I can just pay, and that's one of my goals, is I want to learn to be a better writer. So I do admire people with like English degrees, journalism. To me, journalists are like good journalists. It's just a certain mindset that to me seems really intelligent. But now that I've like written a couple books, now I'm like, I'd like to learn how to write, like to have a strong point of view and write like essays, critical essays, and like memoirs and things like that.
Yeah,
Just
I
for
love that.
because I feel like I have something to share, I have something to say, even just to teach. It's like my cross to bear is I have to write it down.
I mean, I think it's every writer's cross to bear is like, that we have to do it. I feel like I always tell people don't be a writer unless you can't not be a writer because it's grueling, it's thankless, it takes a ton of stamina. Yes, computers are, a blessing over typewriters, but it still takes the time and it's very lonely, right? It's just like you and your thoughts and tussling and getting them, getting the wording just right and the syntax and the vibe. I like, my friend is a jazz musician and he played this big concert over the weekend, and I was like, that seems like a way more fun life path than the one that I've chosen. He's collaborating with different people, all sorts of different projects. The writing path is lonely and grueling.
I Yeah, and you've probably written, I mean, you really have a background in writing. I guess my turnoff is I've known so many like MFA types in writing that they're like obsessed with this notion or this identity of being a writer, where I just feel like I have things to say and I have things to share and teach, and I all I'm do is I think all the time, and then the more I realize, oh, maybe that's what a writer is like. I have to get it out, you
Yeah.
know. Like if you asked me years ago, the idea of like writing, I had such a block, and I think it's from meeting those people that are just, they're obsessed with something or creating something, but then those poor people like spent $1 million, they're never getting published, they're obsessed with like getting published. I'm like, well, even getting published, like that's not your like golden ticket, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, now you got like cast and you're the star of a show or something like that,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Like even book advances, they like, I'm sure there's different deals, but they don't even like my advances, it all come in thirds.
Mm-hmm.
so I get a third when I sign the book deal, a third when I turn in my manuscript, and then a third once the book comes out. And I have to remember to invoice them.
Right.
So it's not even like, oh, here's a nice chunk of money that I could do something with. By the time it gets broken up like that, it just goes into the wash of life, you know? And that's my experience. But talking to other writers and with book deals and stuff, it all seemed pretty status quo, at least at the level I'm at.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to my friend Miriam about this. She's also a journalist. She just finished a book, and how, I mean, I think what you're talking about speaks to the issue of being a writer, right? And taking on an identity construct versus focusing on what wants to be said. How can I say it the best way, and being of service to that? But like Miriam and I were talking about the dreams that we held for ourselves as journalists, as writers, and what we envisioned our career paths to be. And then with what we now know of how the world works and how industry works, and you know, the people who play the game, you know, get certain benefits that those who aren't willing to compromise truth, you know, or freedom of expression or whatnot don't. So it's interesting now because, you know, it's odd to me to define myself. You know, on my website, I say words, lines, transformation. It feels weird to say like writer, author, journalist. They all feel so reductive. But I feel like once we go scorched earth enough and we realize what a sham all these industries really are, then it's like, well, what do I dream into now? Because my dream of being like the next Joan Didion is not going to work these days, because when FSG was interested in me, they told me I couldn't talk about circumcision being a problem, and I couldn't talk about you know, children not being breastfed, having issues. And I just realized like all these gatekeepers were prohibitive for me having the expression that I wanted to have and the reach that I wanted to have. So it's like the dream and the fantasy of being a writer and then the reality, in my experience, are so different.
Yeah, and you've like, I mean, coming out with a journalism degree and like getting into it probably right away. I mean, you started writing like right at school or after, didn't you?
I did.
I do it. I really do admire that. Like I would call you a writer. I get when someone asks me, I'll say I'm an author
Mm-hmm.
because I've authored books and they've been published, and I'm working on hopefully another, knock on wood, book deal. But like writer, I just like cringe. I'm like, I have no training. That's why I want to take some writing classes. Like after getting published, I'm like, maybe I should take a class,
I
you
love
know.
that. I admire that. There's a lot of humility in that.
Well, I just to get some other perspective. I mean, all this stuff runs through. I mean, in a publishing house, it's like I have two editors, book designers, you know, a metadata team that analyzes and they come up with a good little write up on the book and things like that. So there is like this blessing of the machine of a publisher,
Right.
right? So it's like, well, if it was that bad, I feel like would these editors be like, look, you got to change this, and this? But they're all like, oh no, this is great. You have a voice, things like that. And then I'm like, well, I work with almost all British people, and I'm like, they're polite.
Right.
The Brits are like socially very polite and
Right.
like you know, respectful. But yeah, so that's my plan is this year, especially when Jupiter goes into Gemini, it seems like a great time to really also like go with that flow and learn something new, like get better at writing. So I want to get more skilled.
I like that. I always recommend, not that you're asking, but like reading the great writers, you know, and like reading them over and over again. I spent a chunk of time, maybe a decade ago, with Salinger, and I'm like, I want to read every Salinger book and figure out what is his secret sauce? Like, why is he great? And what I realize his trick is he has one character tell another character a secret about a third character. This is
Okay.
you'll see this in every book. So we have this inside information that the characters don't know that we have about them. And it's kind of this like triangulation. And I did the same thing, you know, with Tom Robbins and some other writers, and just like really honed in on like, what is it that has made this person like a literary sensation? And it was a really fun exercise.
I think that's a great idea. I've actually sort of started doing that, like where I'm like, I should give myself the literature degree that I never got, at least just by reading stuff. So I
Yeah.
started with like classics like you know, this, what is it? The Sun Also Rises.
Mm-hmm. Hemingway,
Yeah,
so
Hemingway.
succinct, so
Well,
minimal.
I was amazed because like I read like Old Man and the Sea like as a teenager, and I don't think they should teach literature to like teenagers because there's always going to be a couple smart kids that like get into it. And granted, I did love The Stranger,
Mm-hmm.
but I read that book and I had no bearing on it. And you come into class and you're trying to analyze it and what does the fish represent and all this. But going back now as an adult and someone who has, you know, published a few books, so I started with that, and then it just disappeared off my Kindle. I use a Kindle for that stuff because you can buy these classics like they're $1. So I don't know what happened to it. I was like halfway through, so they stole it back from me. But I was amazed that within 3 pages already got the lay down on this character who like his whole history. So that was cool. But I started reading Mark Twain's short stories
Twain's amazing.
because I read his quotes and I'm always like, okay, this guy, there's a brilliance. I love the Americanness,
Yeah.
and it's like male. So I'm in the middle of this short stories. Turns out it's more like a book. But so yeah, I'm picking all of that up. And I also started reading Paradise Lost.
Ooh, Milton?
Yeah. Which is like dense, but there's so many references that I'm going to tie into Kabbalah for a future project that I'm working on. And I have a friend who's more, you know, academia driven poet and things like that. So she's like working on a thing. So that just inspired me
Mhm.
to let me, you know, I know what the story's about a bit, and then just the precision and that language. It's like I can like literally want to every 2 lines make footnotes and from my perspective of how it ties into mystical Kabbalah. So I feel like I should just read it. I should just read it as a casual flow and then go back and like
Yeah.
dissect it. But I'm dissecting it through my lens, you know. But so but I think part of it is just getting all that stuff in your brain.
And just seeing all the different ways. I love that you mentioned Twain because I read Adventures of Huckleberry Finn in 10th grade, and that was the book that like shook me to my core and made me want to be a writer.
Wow, I love
Because
that.
I was shocked that I could feel so much, that it could elicit so much emotion. And it was specifically writing in the dialect, right? And, you know, the dialect of the slave. And I remember, you know, a few years ago, I was writing for a fictional podcast and I wrote, I'd pitched the story to my editor at the podcast and I got the go ahead. And it was about a real life love affair I had in Costa Rica with a Nicaraguan refugee who had a very thick patois accent, and his name was Jamal. All this was in the pitch. And so I worked really hard on the script to like really get the accent right and
That's
the
tricky.
lingo right. And then they said, well, we can't accept this because this is cultural appropriation and you're racist for
Wait, what year was this?
this was 2020.
Okay, so
And
right at they were like, okay, we got the mess, we got the memo.
right. And I was like, wait a minute, we're not allowed to write in dialect anymore. And my editor, who was in his mid 50s, said no. And I said, oh, okay, so was Mark Twain also a racist who was guilty of cultural appropriation? And he said yes. And I was like, shame on you. Like,
Oh
how do
man,
you sleep at night with that fucking bullshit running your head?
those narratives are big time plaguing publishing, especially American publishing. I have a friend who got a book deal. They were able to pause it because they just had a child and things like that. They were the first writer this new publishing house signed, and then they did this whole feature of like their writers, but if they never even listed her because she's like white. Like, you're just going out of your way to like not feature somebody. And I'm like, if you're elevating these voices, like, I want interesting stories.
Right.
Like, what is this like paradigm we entered where like, if whatever your culture is, that could be a great story. I'm certainly interested in it, but I'm not interested in that story because it's your culture. If I just wrote like, I'm a normal Christian white American and I go to Chick-fil-A, like, that's not a story. That's like not interesting. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I see it from a distance. I do like my publisher. I don't know, they're English, but I do notice they feature. I'm gonna have a meeting with them because I'm like, is it all just like, come on? It's taking over. It's like, so my wife is working on this project that has to do with mothering. I don't want to reveal too much until she's like drops it. So I have to like keep it a little bit sealed. And someone sent her this Substack article about like this whole culture now of mom influencers, right? So like, look at me, like, we're homesteading on Instagram and I have 4 children and I make sourdough bread every day and blah blah blah. Like, great. But the whole article, the whole tone and the whole perspective was like, oh, it's mostly these like white women doing it, and then like capitalizing on this and capitalism. Like, they just throw in every term, right? I'm like waiting for something about cultural appropriation, but they just have to go out of their way to shit on it because the people happen to be white, and then somehow they're monetizing motherhood. I'm like, what is even your message? Like, what is the world that like there's so many shit articles where I'm like, what is your actual perspective? Like, what is the world that you want to live in? Like, are you saying it would be better off that the government gives us all, tells us what our jobs should be, right? And not,
well, it is a Marxist agenda, so kind of
like, to not have the opportunity to I like, kudos to people that are able to take something just them and monetize it.
Yeah.
I think the millennials really gave us that and opened that door to be like, no, guess what? You are a special flower and you can monetize just being yourself. Not everybody, but what's the problem? So they happen to be white. Like, I know a black mom influencer. Like, is that okay then? Like,
Probably.
there's no redemption in that thought. Like, there's not even a solution to say, I think this is bad because capitalism, and it would be better that we're enslaved and we have a government that just makes everything equal. And it's like, I read it and then I get so frustrated. Like, now I'm podcasting about it with you. And I'm like, why did this person send this to you? It's like, these moms, they're like white and they all live in white houses. They're like pretty. And I'm like, Gina's like, wait, I live in a white house. I'm an attractive mom. Uh, like, what is the point of that thought stream?
It's not even a thought stream. Like, that's the thing, is like, I don't think those people are thinking it through and could even take it to like, oh, we just want the government to tell us what to do. It's just, I need to shit on whiteness. I need to self-flagellate for whiteness. I need to parrot this narrative to feel relevant in a larger industry and a larger psyop that I don't understand, that only exists to divide us and decimate our populace.
Well, 100%. I guess what drives me the most, if I really think it drives me the most crazy about it, is what is your real point of view and your solution? Like, I would be happier reading an article where someone says we need to bring back like an elite aristocracy. All get like And if they just supported a point of view, I'd rather read that than just like, oh, well, imply that you're white or that you monetized a skill set. That's capitalism and that's bad. Like
Right.
capitalism's the problem with capitalism is like BlackRock, not an
But that's a
individual.
monopoly. Monopolies are the problem. Oligarchy is the problem.
But capitalism, as we see it, just allows for this insanity to thrive. Where the ideal of capitalism to me is like you're an individual and you can create things and monetize it, and it should be a free market. And I just really kudos to people who just monetize their stuff. And I do think we live in the most opportune time to like, that's what I do. That's what you do.
Totally.
We like, and people like around here in Vermont, people are, what do you do? And meaning what do you do for a job? At least in LA, my experience is people ask you what you did, they were interested in what your interests were,
Right.
not what you like, oh, what do you do for money?
Right.
So I can like writer sounds like a job, and then but trying to, and Vermont's a little like there I meet a lot of cool people and they are open to all this stuff, but I never quite know what to say, or like coming back into the country through TSA, like where it's like occupation. You're like a
Right.
numerologist, prophet, seer,
Well, I like
mystic.
Seer.
Mystic. I put that's in my bio. Like mystic. So at least with like being an author, now I could just like writer just checks off and no questions asked.
Right.
It could
Right.
be writing articles, books, am I literary, or am I right? Am I John Grisham?
Yeah.
You know, um,
When you go through TSA, do you get pissed? Do you have heart flutters? Are you irritated by the theater of it all?
well, yeah, I mean, this is like me every day, just going through life, especially with like they're ramping up like COVID again right now. And I'm like, I'm already seeing like the mass, and I'm already like just like getting pissed. But the good news is what an auspicious alignment that they just so happen to have some new vaccines ready too. So,
It's
and
such a
thank God,
coincidence.
right? Like, but
Thank
that's
God.
so
And
helpful.
it's so helpful, and thank God the regulating body representative is also on the board at Pfizer. Like there's no
Yeah,
conflict of interest there.
and that's not capitalism gone astray. We got to worry about a mom influencer. Yeah, TSA, I don't get nervous in the sense I'm not like doing anything illegal, but I mean I've definitely been pulled aside. And
For what?
random searches, right? And
Right.
I get that. I've gotten that more than I would have thought. I haven't flown in a while since having a kid, but I did make the mistake. Lesson learned. I was actually going from LA to New York a couple years ago, and I had all these crystals that I put in my carry-ons, like quartz crystals, and because I was going to meet with a bunch of clients, I was going to do readings, and I'm like, oh, it's good. The crystals, it's good for the show, and I like them. But when I watch the bag go through the scanner, like a quartz crystal like that big, it looks like a weird. Like I get why they like all of a sudden had to go aside. They had to search everything, start swabbing my asshole for like gunpowder. Um, that was a mistake because then they're rifling through my tarot cards, and
Mm,
and they're not like so definitely lesson learned in that I do not travel, at least to carry on, with any crystals anymore. But the
right.
whole all of it, yeah, I'm against like all of it. 'Cause I actually, we were probably old enough, I remember being able to go to the airport as a kid and just go right up and like, oh, like I remember my mom came back from something, and you're right, there's no security really.
Right.
You get off the plane and there you are.
Yeah.
Like, hey, like, and that was it. And then the first Iraq war, security got a little intense, and then it just kept getting more and more intense. And then it's always to protect you or for your convenience or to serve you better. And people are just like, okay, this is what I do. you
I
know?
won't fly anymore. And I have friends who get irritated because they want to take trips with me. And I'm like, trust me, it's a public service because I've never been able to behave myself with TSA. I'm always like leading the revolution that I expect everyone to jump in, but I'm always
Yeah.
the only one. And then I always opt out. And one time I opted out when Mercury was retrograde, as it is now. And, the swab set off an alarm. So I get
Really?
pulled into a private room, and I knew it was a Mercury retrograde thing. And they had me unbutton just the button of my pants, not the zipper. And she just took her gloved hand around the inside of the waistband, and she's like, "You're free to go." And I'm like, "Ladies, if we're going to commit to this sham, then I'm going to need you to really commit, because if you think that I could actually be a threat to other people's safety, we all know where I might be hiding the thing. So are you going to show up for your job, or is this, we're just going to admit that this is theater and this is all fake?" And they were like, "Just go."
Yeah, and I'm waiting. Like they're really trying to push fucking COVID again. And I'm already seeing, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing like the people, they don't even read art, they don't even read books, but they just read headlines, right? It's like you can just watch the world and know their algorithm. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I'm seeing people walk alone down the street. We're in Vermont, like basically in the middle of nowhere. And I respect if you're wearing that mask for fumes and you're walking on the road and cars and dust particles and things like that. So we'll see. I feel like more and more people are keen to what's happening now, which I didn't think would happen.
You didn't think that anyone would wake up to the sham who wasn't clued into it
Yeah,
from the get-go?
I had no hopes of that. And
Oh,
more hopeful now. I mean, I was open to the truth, but like in 2020, I was like, we can see where this is going. But I have noticed a pattern, and I'll track the astrology. All of a sudden, things open, like the energy opens up. Oh, okay. Like everything is coming to light. Everything that would deem you a conspiracy theorist,
mhm.
just based on like the most simple, obvious connecting. You don't even have to connect dots. It's like as obvious as, oh, it's raining out and I'm wet. Do I need to do a study as to why I'm wet? Like,
Right, right.
like
We need to consult the
it's
science.
yeah, exactly. Like, are you wet? Like, you're not wet. Um, that's what it felt like. So I do see, and then I'm like, well, I'm also in that algorithm, and those are the people that I know. But already, you know what I
Right.
mean? But it does seem like more and more people, and like even the mainstream media is like had to finally talk about like, oh yeah, it does look like it was coming from a lab. Oh, it does look like there was an actual conspiracy to cover that up, but nothing's happening. Like no heads are rolling. There's no retributions. There's no justice happening. And we're just gonna like let everything slide. I'm gonna be that like angry idiot who's like what the fuck? Like something still needs to happen. Like where's this justice?
I'm right there with you. I mean, I was walking with a girlfriend yesterday, and there was a car parked next to mine with a Biden Harris sticker on it. And I'm just like, really? In 2023, you're not going to scrape that shit off? You have no dignity. What, you're still going to stand by that decision that you should be ashamed of and hiding?
Yeah, it's like that's like profound because I'll meet a lot of people, they really love to get caught up that their identity is being a Democrat, but nobody is like, oh, yeah, like I really like Biden. Like my cousin who I love and we get along great. And what she doesn't know is she's like so hardcore conservative. She makes like Ronald Reagan look like a libtard, but she doesn't realize, like she doesn't think, like she's like, to get these homeless people all need jobs, like she's like New Yorker. And I'm like, that's I'm not sure you realize where like you stand on this other extreme, like but yeah, it's weird. The politics too is like another thing where people get really so caught up, and we're being programmed to get so caught up, and there's this division that never needs to exist. And it does fascinate me that even the quote far right and the quote far left are saying the exact same thing. We have oppressive institutions and organizations that do not have our best human interest in mind. And imagine if all of those people realized that, but they've been played to all pit against each other, right? And like, it's insane because everybody's coming from a perspective of some level of disenfranchisement or powerless, of the feeling of being powerless,
Right.
which is also kind of dumb because then you're just relying on institutions to give you. It's like even the quote far right. I'm like, yeah, but what do you rely? You are, what you're saying is communism in the sense that you want the institution of the government to provide you with the better life,
I
right?
think it's a reflection of where we're at in terms of our level of consciousness. And that's what shocked me about the past few years of like, people want to be told what to do. They want some sort of daddy government acting as their overlord. You know, if it's God, if it's a president, if it's Fauci, people are, it seems to me, don't have a strong enough sense of self, don't have enough trust in their own intuition, inner authority, resourcefulness, or whatnot, that I think the majorities really want to be ordo followers.
I
It's
100%. Sorry, are you still going on that? I just
no,
wanted to
it's
back it
just
up.
no. I please take it.
Well, and I've been saying a similar thing, even based on this, like, we're in the Aquarian age, right? Or in my magical tradition, it's the Eon of Horus. And however you want to look at it, new age, there's a new consciousness shift, right? There's a sort of new formula, if you will, philosophical or spiritual formula for humanity to sort of live by. And the idea is you are more empowered now as an individual. And it's exactly what you're saying, is that there's still some sort of just so many incarnations of being like having to surrender your power to an authority. And it's strong. It's just the humanity is still, their psychology is still captive by that. And we're looking for authorities, we're looking for experts. So it's interesting to see experts and authority, especially in America. More and more people, which surprised me, are saying, wait, none of these authorities are actually telling the truth. It turns out they don't have the best interest in mind. The CDC has no idea. Like, they have backtracked on everything that they've said, right? And so people are seeing just, oh, it doesn't work, right? There's still people out there that are blind enough to be like, okay, well, this new vaccine, this one's going to stop the spread and things like that. But it's the attachment to having that authority, and that's going to be the hard break, right? So magic, we're going to say, okay, this is the Eon of Horus, the new quote Messiah, right? The old paradigm is we had a Messiah, we had to have a big teacher. So in the spiritual formula is like, we need a Jesus Christ, we need a Buddha, we need to follow, like, and I think that's how it worked. Like, the energy shift and that transmission for your development came through some high teacher, and then the lower vibration of that is a king and a queen, and then a lower vibration is like, whatever, some politician, right? Or
right.
now
Or your
America's
manager.
just something, yeah. And the new Messiah now, and the magical teaching is your own individual connection to God, spirit. Would throw in a noun or an adjective, whatever you're um and that's very challenging, and we're just not quite there yet. It doesn't mean we don't have a place for teachers and wisdom and whatnot, but it's like, it was amazing to see how much people that I didn't even think were so dependent on what the authorities said,
Right.
when I thought I was friends with mostly rugged individualists, which mostly I am, because most of my inner group of people were all on the same page, right? But it's all is like this addiction to some level of enslavement
Exactly.
consciousness. And then now the new narrative is like, well, you're not, like, you have to be a certain level of enslaved and victim and powerlessness. Otherwise, you ain't shit, you know.
Right. But it's weird because then you're saying, like, when you claim, like, I'm the biggest victim, we might win, like, social credit, but we're so losing. It's like we're claiming, like, I'm disempowered and I have no agency over my sucky lot in life. So I might get pity from other people, but it's this trap that gets us to disempower ourselves. And I just see it as so woven in to the system that, like, if we can wave a magic wand today and say no more mandates, no more Patriot Act, no more propagandizing our own people, we're going to go back to, like, an honest, on the level constitutional republic, I don't think most adults could handle themselves without someone telling them what to do. I feel like we're kind of a lost cause. Let's just focus on the kids at this point. And, it's like thalidomide babies. Like, sorry, guys, we fucked up and you're fucked for the rest of your incarnation, but we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's important, though, that people like us, and we're definitely friends with and surround ourselves, and even our algorithm is going to be a little more free thinking. But even to that extent, I'm still, like, seeing people that are so into some type of politician, whether it's right wing or left wing, that even that notion of, like, well, I gotta vote this president, my whole, like, that have so much bearing on your life and whether or not your life is gonna be successful or not. Like, when Trump got elected, I was like, oh God, this seems dark and horrible. But I'm still gonna focus on doing well. And then his whole presidency, I was like, wow, like, I've done great. Like, my whole everything I've been doing is, like, really built up. And then I didn't think, oh wow, this, like, Biden clown, this, like, Manchurian candidate. I was like, wow, times are actually darker. And wait, I've still managed to do better,
Mm,
so, like, did the president have all this bearing? Do I not? I don't like what's going on with the world since all this COVID insanity,
right.
but obviously you and I are on this exact page with all this crazy. Um, so, but I see where I slip into just allowing myself to, like, on some level, feel some despair or some trigger. Like, sometimes it's easy to see, wow, this could go full hopeless, full, like, authoritarian, because you just see these patterns, right? And then there's the mainstream where it's like, literally, don't think for yourself. Here's a New York Times op-ed piece, how voting is bad for democracy. that
Right.
that, that exists.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, I
And
think it's a fine line of, like, how much do we move between the cracks, pull our attention out of the sham show, and just focus on what we're creating and making our lives comfortable and bountiful and beautiful and lovely. And then also, like, what is our responsibility to steering the earth ship onto saner trajectory? What is our responsibility to safeguarding future generations? Like, I know you talked about this in a recent podcast of, like, our addiction to comfort, right? And it's like, I saw a video about, okay, if they're going to lock us down again, this guy was like, well, just focus on your dharma and focus on your investing and do your spiritual work and don't get caught up in it. And I can see the value of that, but I can also see that if we unified and strategized and stood up and said no, that it might not have to go that way. So it's like,
yeah,
how
I
do you
think
figure
that's
out the right way to handle it?
I'm not going to go with the last. I mean, if it really got to a point where I'm like, wow, they're sitting out in my yard with guns telling me to never leave my house. Okay, I'll, here I am. But it's exactly that. And I think more and more people are definitely saying no. Just in our local community, we've met so many on the same page,
Nice.
and they're just ready. They've already told stores, like, if you put up a mandate, like, we're not coming here.
Oh,
Right.
nice.
So
Preemptive.
yeah, so it's like people are making preemptive strikes. They're already laying it down, saying, no, this isn't happening. Or if you're gonna do this, like, nowadays too, you can always shop somewhere else.
Right.
I did compromise my values last year, and I went into a lifestyle gift shop that was demanding masks because they sold my book, and I wanted to see it and get a picture of it on the shelf. And I was so conflicted. I was like,
Yeah.
because I'm a man of virtue, right? I'm not fucking capitulating for this shit. But then I'm like, oh, it's my book, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers because I still want them to sell my book.
Right.
It's not like they're like doing anything like. So I put the mask on, and I was with someone who had never seen me in a mask. They were like, you look so funny in a mask. I don't even know. I had to like rig it. I feel like I maybe tied a sock around my face or something.
I
But
like
I
that.
like took the picture, and it's not like the woman was rude. She wasn't awesome either, but I was like, I'm still thinking about it. Like a year plus later, I'm like conflicted, like, oh, I really wanted that pic. I wanted to see my book in the store. It's really fun. Like, that's like the coolest part in a way of writing a book, is like, there it is, or people send me pictures. But I'm glad that there's people here sticking to their guns. They're not just going to meditate it away, and are already notifying, putting businesses on point already.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think I thought, oh, they're really going to ramp it up, of course, just in time for elections and stuff. But
Instance.
yeah, I know, like, just in time for a new variant, just in time for the new vaccine rollout. So
Right. And
my
mail in voting again, because that worked
uh,
so well last time.
you know what surprises me more, like, as a child, I always like would think, how do we know any election is real to begin with? Like, it seems like like so much is on the line. I'm always too thinking, like, how is it more people don't get assassinated? Like, these seem like rational thoughts as like a 12-year-old boy, just
Right.
not like I'm going to be an expert in geopolitics, but you know just like thinking in those terms, it seems pretty obvious. But the whole, yeah, like, regardless of like direct cheating, all the elections now in America, it just seems like a mess. Like, you don't even know, and all of a sudden, like, oh, it takes a month now to count an election. um just even if you think everything's on the up and up, shouldn't you be like, wait, this doesn't seem like a good system
Right.
you
Right.
know
You would think, but like all the things that were like, why aren't people thinking this? Why aren't people thinking this? I mean, for me, it just points to the fact that they no longer have access to their thinking capabilities. But in terms of if they are going to do another lockdown with this move into the Aries Libra axis, like how will that change
Mhm.
lockdown version 2 from lockdown version 1?
Dani, really good question. So the North Node. So those of you, just a little basic info. The North Node is the direction that we're leaning into, that we're moving into. On a more poetic notion, it's sort of a destiny and a calling. But it's going to also, for the unconscious collective, it's going to be the flow of inertia. And so there's a tendency into this Aries direction of North Node. Aries is war. Aries is self-assertion. And Aries is like, no, I'm doing my thing, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to do my thing for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's going to be a lot tougher to manipulate because it's a headstrong energy.
Yeah.
To tie it into magic, in the notion of my tradition, that the language will say we're in the eon of Horus. Horus is a god of war,
Mm-hmm.
so Mars is a god of war. So Mars is not going to back down.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's working in our favor. And You know what was interesting? I'd messaged you a bit about this, but we just came out of a direct square. We're still in this energy where Pluto, which really is this notion of inevitability. And I've
Mhm.
talked a lot about Pluto. Pluto has these longer cycles. So it takes about 250 years for Pluto to get back into a sign. Pluto just went into Aquarius, which the last time this happened was during the American Revolution. So
Oh,
it's really the energy. Now, we could say America started in 1776, but if we didn't win the Revolutionary War, there would be no America, at least not at that time. So really, America didn't really gain its independence until Pluto was in Aquarius.
oh,
And so this happened, and this just happened now for the first time since the Revolutionary War, while the America was in middle of fighting it. Now it's retrograded back into Capricorn. Capricorn is going to represent oppressive, authoritarian control. Doesn't have to be oppressive, but that's how it turns out into the low consciousness of man.
right.
I mean man is mankind.
Of course.
Just to remind people about English. Uh,
I have a big boy panty, big girl panty audience.
I
They
mean, I've started to say humanity more. I actually like that. That sounds optimistic. But Aquarius is this liberation, this freedom. It is notions. The French Revolution happened. Last time we had this for the planet was these were like new ways, like the people. And Aquarius, you're in Aquarius, it's you'll see it as the people collective. It's the sign of it's the friendly sign. I do like the saying Aquarius loves humanity, doesn't like people. But
very accurate.
the so, it's a little just distant. Like you guys can have your problems. I'm off here doing my science. Um, but that is this shift now in consciousness. But Pluto was well, we're still sort of in the energy of a square, and so that's creating tension. And Pluto is this inevitability, and
Mhm.
it's the soul, and it's like Pluto will make you face the music whether you're ready to or not. And the nodes in Aries and Libra have been squaring it. But what I discovered is deeper in that astrology. There's a way I can attribute numerology
Mhm.
based on Hebrew letters that are attributed to those different aspects. Like so Pluto has a Hebrew letter attributed. It has a tarot card attributed, and the Aries and Libra have Hebrew letters attributed. But when you add it all up, that number was the same numerology as Trump. And the day that it went exact square is when
And
he had
meaning is like Trump's name.
the
Trump is it?
name. Yeah,
Okay.
the name. So there's
And
different.
does it mean Trump the incarnate human or Trump as in the card that beats all the other cards?
Well, both because it's the word.
Right.
So, but if you think about just Trump, 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 like
Yeah.
that is in the that is in this in everybody's consciousness, like the
Right.
entire planet, basically. Like probably even there's probably a Trump, someone who lionizes Trump, like in the middle of like a jungle somewhere, like off-grid tribe that has barely been discovered, but it somehow has a cell phone. Like I see all these like crazy footage of like people in India like loving Trump and have
Right.
like shrines. It's like very interesting to me. But that square, the numerology of that is the same as the name Trump, which
Interesting.
the day that it went exactly square, there was like more charges against him. And then we have Libra, which is like coming out of a legal thing. So I don't know. I think that it's interesting because to me, Trump represents now, it's like way beyond Trump, the man, right? Who takes shits and things like that. And
Right.
whatever, probably likes macaroni and cheese. Like this is like a bigger concept, but it's an interesting choice of a name because Trump trumps everything. So if you just think
Exactly.
about the sort of word magic, and that's your area of expertise, it's powerful. The numerology, though, I when I first looked into this some time ago, I wanted to find the deepest, darkest, destructive things through all these old texts and Kabbalah stuff that I have, where like people, magicians and Jews have been logging numbers, for thousands of years, and I've been lucky to have access to some of this. And
Like gematria?
yeah.
Okay.
And it's like all of this positive, like very positive, even lines about astrologers and magicians and mystical people. And I was like, okay. And then when I wanted to find good stuff back a few years ago, let's see the Biden name frequency. Literally, a great president and the Duke of Hell and all of the destructive energy of Mars, which is the letter Pe in Hebrew,
Okay.
which is attributed to the Tower card. And I was like, well, this isn't good. And so sometimes, and now I'm like, wow, things are weird. So my biggest fear of the North Node Aries is it's warmongering. But I think in this case, overall, I think that it's just people are fed up.
Mm-hmm.
I think even just average person is gonna be like, you know what, fuck you, I'm just not doing this. Minus like New York City or something and San Francisco or whatever.
I
But
hope that's. Oh, sorry.
I mean, we'll see. I'm glad we have a network here. My concern is I'm not going to tolerate my son learning to speak around people that are, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And
And
then you
what's,
won't be able to learn facial expressions and those subtle shifts that mean so much for developing emotional intelligence.
yeah, gee, like it's so funny how obvious that is. I mean, at least there's like a lot of studies, like legit, like the regular institutions that people have come to trust. But what's sad is I keep meeting parents with like 4-year-olds where their real speaking development happened in the height of masking, and they're having a lot of trouble. And it honestly breaks my heart
Yeah.
because you're like, this is a sweet and bright child. It's not like, but they're conditioning and they're learning and what they saw. And and on some level, I like, part of me wants to rage like this is a child abuse, but a lot of people, like, they are in positions to put their kids they have to put their kids in some like daycare, whatever the situation. And that's why I've been encouraging people for years in my teachings, which isn't me, but these are magical teachings, to create something, to create a business, to monetize. So you not just so you can, make money, but so you're more empowered of your life and your life's choices, to not be beholden. And I have done that. And I'm so grateful that I did that now as a parent.